It is a case that rocked the country. It rocked us here in Idaho. It's just one that has you asking so many questions why. And so we're going to delve into that tonight. If you have any questions, please send them to us, questions@eastidahonews.com. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Also, a little bit later, we'll have Doug Hart. Remember Doug Hart, the FBI guy who testified at the Daybell trials? I asked him about his involvement in the Groene case, the Edward Duncan case back in the mid-2000s. And I'll play his soundbite a little bit later about his involvement. But this case goes back to May 16th, 2005. Authorities discovered the bodies of Brenda Groene. She was 40, her boyfriend, Mark McKenzie, who was 37, and her son, Slade Groene, who was 13. This was at their home along Lake Coeur d'Alene, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Two of Brenda's other children, Dylan, who was 9, and Shasta, who was 8, were missing. An Amber Alert was issued. Searchers combed the area for the missing children, while authorities investigated the deaths at the home as homicides. Autopsies determined the cause of death to be blunt trauma to the head, and the victims had been bound. 47 days later, a month and a half later, on July 2nd, 2005, Shasta was seen at Denny's, a restaurant in Coeur d'Alene, in the company of an unknown man. A waitress, a manager, and 2 customers at the restaurant recognized the girl from media reports. They surreptitiously called the police and positioned themselves so that the man could not leave the restaurant. Police officers arrived and arrested him. His name was Edward Duncan. And Shasta identified herself to the waitress at the restaurant and authorities that she was indeed the missing girl and was taken to a medical center for treatment and reunited with her father. Now, a few years ago, that waitress at the Denny's restaurant spoke about that moment on an investigation discovery special. Here's what she said.
The restaurant sits really, really uniquely, strategically right off the highway. I went in for a regular shift, and I had been at work for probably about 4 hours. Coming back from break, I see a man and what looks to be a child in my section. It was about 1:30, 1:45-ish in the morning. So it was a little strange, but I walked over to say hello to my customers. When I got to the table, everything felt off. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and something was gnawing at my subconscious. The little girl, she was filthy. You could tell her hair wasn't very clean. She was in clothes that absolutely looked filthy. I asked, can I get you something to drink? She would not respond at all. And he wouldn't take his eyes off of her, which is just odd.
That was the waitress at the Denny's. Can you imagine if you're working and in walks this little girl who's missing? Authorities really hoped and thought that because Shasta was alive, her little brother might be alive as well, Dylan. Police asked for tips, specifically concerning sightings of a stolen red Jeep Cherokee with Missouri license plates that Duncan had been driving at the time of his arrest. They discovered that he had rented a car in Minnesota and never returned it. A gas station employee in Kellogg, Idaho, about 40 miles east of Coeur d'Alene, recognized the vehicle as one that had stopped at her gas station hours before Duncan was arrested. The employee suspected the girl wandering around the station might have been Shasta, but did not confront her as nothing appeared out of the ordinary. The employee and her manager notified authorities after reviewing surveillance camera footage and identified Duncan and Shasta in the video, but Dylan was not in that video. 2 days later, they found a makeshift campsite in the Lolo National Forest near St. Regis, Montana. This was on July 4th, 20 years ago. The remains were sent to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia for DNA testing, and they confirmed that they were indeed those of Dylan. And during the trial, it emerged that Duncan had shot Dylan at point-blank range by holding a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun to his head. Just horrific. What we know about these murders comes from Shasta. She's the only living person that witnessed them. She told police that Duncan killed her mom, older brother, and her mother's fiance, then kidnapped Shasta and her brother and drove them both away in that stolen Jeep. She said that her mother came into Dylan's and her room and woke them up. Her mother said, quote, "Someone is in the house." Then they went into the living room where she saw Duncan wearing black gloves and holding a gun. Duncan tied her mother's hands with nylon zip ties and did the same to her mother's fiance and her brother Slade. Shasta and Dylan were removed from the house and placed outside on the lawn. While waiting for her brother, she heard multiple thumping sounds from inside the house, just horrific. She then saw her injured older brother staggering away from the entrance of the house. He then bludgeoned the three to death and proceeded to place Shasta and Dylan in the car. He took the children to other locations where he reportedly and repeatedly raped and tortured them for 6 weeks. Duncan told her how he had beaten her family members to death with a hammer. Shasta also told investigators how Dylan was murdered. Duncan insisted the death was an accident. Initially, Shasta was standing on the other side of Duncan's Jeep when she heard a loud boom. She then ran to the other side of the Jeep and saw Dylan lying on the ground screaming. Duncan was digging through a clear plastic box looking for beer when a shotgun that was kept went off, hitting Dylan in the stomach. Shasta said that when she saw Dylan put the shotgun to Dylan's head and pull the trigger, it failed to fire. Dylan begged Duncan not to kill him. Duncan reloaded the gun, put it back to the boy's head, and killed him. He died instantly. According to Shasta, Duncan started to cry and told her that he only killed him to put him out of his misery. Shasta reported that Duncan nearly killed her days after killing Dylan. She said that he gave her the choice to be killed either by strangulation or with a gun. Shasta chose the former, and Duncan proceeded to wrap a rope around her neck and tightly pull it, causing her to start suffocating. However, she summoned enough breath to beg Duncan to stop using his nickname Jet, and he immediately did. He then asked if she would like to meet his mother, to which she responded yes, and the two drove back to Coeur d'Alene and stopped at the Denny's, where Shasta was rescued. Once Duncan was arrested, it was discovered that he was tied to other missing children cases. He was implicated as a possible suspect in several crimes that occurred between 1994 and 1997 when he was on parole, and between 2000 and 2005 when he was free from prison. Although he was cleared as a suspect in some cases, authorities in California and Washington had enough evidence to believe he committed several unsolved murders in their jurisdictions. I'm not going to go through all of that, but what I did not know or needed to be reminded, he ultimately, I should say before I'll back up, he served 11 consecutive, he was sentenced to serve 11 consecutive life sentences without parole for the 1997 murder of Anthony Martinez in California. He had also confessed to but was not charged for the 1996 murder of two girls, Sammy Jo White and Carmen Cubias in Seattle. At the time of the attack on the Groene, he was on the run from a child molestation case in Minnesota. During his incarceration, they tied him to those other cases, as I mentioned, and also he was serving time in Idaho for killing Shasta's family and kidnapping her and her brother, and was given 3 death sentences and 3 life sentences, so he was sentenced to death. He died in March of 2021 at the age of 58 of terminal brain cancer. They discovered during all of this that he had a very violent history that began when he was a teenager. He was 15 years old. He raped a 9-year-old boy at gunpoint. The following year, he was arrested for driving a stolen car. He was sentenced as a juvenile and sent to a boys' ranch in Tacoma, where the Associated Press reports that he told a therapist that he had bound and sexually assaulted 6 boys. He also told the therapist that he'd estimated that he had raped 13 younger boys by the time he was 16. In 1980, he stole several guns from a neighbor, abducted a 14-year-old boy, raped him at gunpoint. He was sentenced to serve 20 years in prison for the crime, but was released after 14. While out on parole, he's known to live in several cases, including Seattle. And then in 1996, he was arrested for marijuana use and released on parole several weeks later. And on and on and on about all these arrests in California and Missouri and North Dakota. And then in March, just a few months before this, he was charged, before the Shasta case, he was charged for molesting 2 boys at a playground in Minnesota. And then bail was set at $15,000. A Fargo businessman whom Duncan had become acquainted helped him post bail, but Duncan skipped bail and disappeared. On June 1st, a federal warrant was issued for his arrest. So he was on the run when this horrible stuff happened to Shasta and her family. Doug Hart was, there's so much more too that I don't want to go into, that you can read about, that's been written about, and docuseries, I believe, have been done on it. But Doug Hart with the FBI worked this case, and I had a chance to ask him about this about a year ago. Actually, it's been 2 years now. No, it was about a year ago. Sorry, a year ago in June. I sat down with Doug Hart in his office. He's since retired from the FBI. He now works in Canyon County as the chief deputy for the sheriff's office. Here's what he said about this case. One of the other cases that you have done, worked on, is when 2 little kids disappeared in, was it 2005? Somewhere around there, mid-2000s. Give us the backstory for those people that aren't familiar with the case.
That was a case involving a subject named Joseph Duncan, who was a serial killer of children, and he kidnapped 2 children and then murdered stepfather, mother, and older brother. And so Shasta and Dylan were the 2 that were 8 and 9 years old at the time, and they were kidnapped, and it was just a massive investigation. And so
and where was it?
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Coeur d'Alene, northern Idaho.
And then he took the children into Montana.
And how did he know the family?
No connection to them whatsoever. None. He was driving to Seattle to visit his mother, and going westbound on I-90, and saw those 2 children out in a little kiddie swimming pool, and that was all it took for him. And he went on to Seattle, eventually came back and couldn't get those kids out of his mind, and so he went in and murdered their family and kidnapped them.
So he actually went to Seattle for the visit, and then came back.
Yes.
So where were you at your point in your career?
So I was in north central Idaho in a smaller office in Lewiston, but we were supervised out of Coeur d'Alene. So when that crime was committed, it was all hands on deck for the duration, basically. And that one was shorter. That happened in May. And Shasta was recovered alive the 4th of July weekend. Now, the ensuing investigation took a number of years and multiple trials, both at the federal and state levels, death penalty case. But that one was very intense, from day one up until when she was recovered, and then subsequently finding the remains of her brother and the campsites and other things that went into that investigation. And again, I played a role in that, as did dozens of other people.
Right. So when a child goes missing, I learned this in the Daybell case, actually, the FBI steps in.
We don't step in to take over, because you don't know whether you have, like in this case with that we've been discussing with the Daybells, is you don't know day one if there's going to be a prosecution, or if it's going to be a federal prosecution, or if it's going to be a state prosecution. You don't predetermine those outcomes. And so what we found is that when children go missing, that there are very frequently, they cross state lines, which brings a federal nexus to it, but we don't want to wait until we've verified a federal nexus. So the response now is that when you have a child go missing, and in that one, I mean, it was clear we found, the mother, brother, and stepfather were bound and murdered, so we knew it wasn't like they had wandered off. We knew we had something really terrible. And so the FBI comes in, but we worked that one with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office. The command post was in the Sheriff's Office, and we just are the best partners we can be. We have certain resources federally that our state and local, city, county, tribal partners don't have, and they have certain things they can do that they're better at. And so we partner with them and try to bring the resources that we have, the expertise we have in missing child cases to bear to try to get to the best resolution as quickly as possible.
How did you find Joseph Duncan?
We didn't. So he had taken those children to a very remote campsite in the mountains of Montana and murdered Shasta's brother there. For whatever reason, he brought her back. And so it was a waitress from Denny's who recognized her and called the police, and they took him into custody. So,
a waitress in Coeur d'Alene.
Mm-hmm.
They just happened to know who she was.
Yeah, I mean, it was widely publicized.
Right.
There were posters of the kids everywhere. But yeah, she recognized her and did the right thing, and so that was how she was found. It wasn't because we had done something brilliant and learned who he was. He had no association of any kind with that family. None. No, not a single phone call, nothing. And this is back, we're dealing with a lot different technology
right.
in the early 2000s than we are in 2019.
Right, no smartphones.
Right.
And the fact, it's just unbelievable that he did come back to Coeur d'Alene, to northern Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, he was sentenced to death, and he died on death row. No, he wasn't executed. He actually died, I think, of cancer.
Died of a brain tumor.
Oh, brain tumor,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 high-profile cases in your career. Probably more. Am I missing any?
There's a few others, but the Joseph Duncan case was very helpful to me in the role that I played in the Daybell case. When you have these cases with massive numbers of manpower and different agencies and coordinating all the paperwork and reports and tasks, so those were valuable experiences that I think helped in the Daybell case to bring that experience with me and share with the others who were involved in the case.
For both of those cases, when you started working on them, did you think they would be as high profile or as big as they were? Like, could you tell with Daybell, like, this is going to be big, or with Shasta Groene, okay, this is going to be big?
You kind of get that point when the media starts showing up and staying with it. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, yes, when you see that the media has developed an interest in the case and that they seem to be staying with it, and so that was, for both of those, there was a lot of media attention with those cases, and so, in the sense, you know that something big is happening, but your focus is really, this is the first time I've spoken with anybody from the media, really, since the Daybell case concluded. So our focus isn't on the media or what the media is doing. Our focus is on just working the case,
right,
and trying to figure it out. And these are both the Duncan case and this one were both very, very difficult. But we also saw just tremendous investigative work done by the detectives and the analysts and the support folks that what they were able to track down and piece together and then ultimately present to a jury. That's what ultimately wins the day. Is that level of detail, that attention to detail, and just not compromising on anything. And so I think in both of those cases, the investigators that were assigned, adhered to that standard of work, and that's what brings a complex case to a successful conclusion.
Right.
So difficult things to deal with, but again, you feel good about being able to contribute in some way, shape, or form to holding those people accountable and to serving the cause of justice in cases where it matters most. I mean, you're, as an investigator, I think when you're dealing with homicides, that's, and I've investigated or participated in several homicide investigations. It doesn't get much more serious than that, because the consequences of a mistake can be pretty significant.
Right.
And so you've got to bring your A game, and that's what everybody did, certainly in the Daybell case and in the Duncan case, and so they're significant, sort of personally and professionally, because of what's at stake if you get it wrong.
So how do you unwind and not let this mess with you mentally? I mean, I see you're a runner, biker. I mean, pretty physically fit. I mean, is that one of your outlets?
I think each person is different, and I think that at some point, does that dam break? I don't know. I haven't reached that point. For me, there is when you raise your hand and you swear an oath to well and faithfully execute the duties of your office, meaning as an agent or a sheriff's deputy or a detective or a police officer, for me personally, that's very, very meaningful. And I think those are the things that give you the strength to persevere through a difficult case like this. A lot is riding on it, and if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And so, to me, that's what it isn't. It isn't the other stuff. It's the weight of responsibility that a law enforcement officer feels, and I know I can speak for everybody at Rexburg and Fremont County and all the agencies that participated in this case, including the prosecutors, that weight of responsibility was a very real thing. It was felt by all, and everybody, this mattered to us. And so it's different. Like, I think from where you sit, you see what we did and what we had to be exposed to, and it's shocking. Mm-hmm. It's not that it isn't shocking to us, but we have to carry it. We have to finish this. We have to carry it through.
Right.
That's to me, that's the armor that we have to help us get through this kind of stuff.
Right.
If you don't have that armor, then I think maybe you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the responsibility that I volunteered when I entered this profession to carry, and that is a source of strength.
Now, Shasta has done a few interviews over the years about her ordeal. Not many. She's not one that's in front of the cameras a lot, and I don't necessarily blame her. I mean, could you imagine going through that, and then where do you go after this? And it's just such a horrible case. And we talk here in a minute with the author of this book about that. But before we get to that, I wanted to read you a column that she wrote, Shasta recently wrote for Oprah Daily, Oprah.com. And this was about the book that's coming out, that is out now. It's called Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. Shasta wrote this with Greg Olson, who is a New York Times bestselling author. He's written several true crime books in the past. But I think this is good to hear directly from Shasta. By the way, I did request for her to come on here, and I haven't heard back. And if she's watching or you know of her, she's always welcome here. Would love to hear her story of overcoming this horrific thing. And she, has had struggles throughout the years. And she admits that. But for now, I want to read you what she said to Oprah.com, Oprah Daily. This was back in last month. 20 years ago this month, I returned to the Montana woods to help police find my brother Dylan's remains. Dylan was 9 and I was 8 when our family was murdered, and we were held captive in a remote campsite in the Lolo National Forest. Dylan was my best friend, maybe my only friend. He died. I lived. He never came home. I did. I grew up, married, and started a family. Things Dylan never got to do. I survived a serial killer. He didn't. From that day when I helped police search for evidence to now, I've been, quote, that girl, the one who got away, the one people talked about, loved, pitied, and later, the one who disappointed them with my addictions, my arrests, my failed attempts at recovery. They felt that I didn't live up to the second chance I was given when recognized at Denny's, leading to my rescue after a 7-week ordeal. I want to be real here. I have to be. That's why I'm writing this now. Every single day after the monster took us, he found a new way to torture our minds and bodies. He was the worst kind of evil that anyone could imagine. If I really want to be real, and I think you need to know this, no matter what he did to me, it pales next to what he did to my brother. Because Dylan is dead, and I'm not. I have lived with that, or tried to, for years. Finally, I hope I have come to terms with it. As much as I can, at least, because recovery after severe trauma is ongoing. I want people to know that being rescued didn't end the trauma of what happened to me and my brother. Trauma is a lasting stain, no matter how hard you try to heal, despite the best intentions of others. Many cared, but most adults shied away from the full story. It was, quote, too painful, they said. Try living it. I wanted to shout back at them. For years, it felt like screaming into the void. I yearned to share my story, but no one could truly listen. It was too much, too terrible to hear. For a time, I even thought that containing my trauma would foster growth, but silence felt like a lie. Sharing bits of truth with a therapist or some other interested adult, then moving on, always left me feeling incomplete. Only complete honesty, stopping myself from caring what others thought, brought me power. Talking with journalist Greg Olson, author of Out of the Woods, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home, was transformative. He was committed to telling my whole story, not just sensationalized snippets, showing my whole life, before and after. Everything. Previously, people who did bother to look at my life after saw only my problems. This time we explored the why. Self-reflection helped me understand my experiences and myself better. I want other survivors to know they're not alone, that feeling broken is okay, and that healing isn't about feeling better. It's about trying to keep going even when everything around you seems to tell you to give up. That's enough. Healing isn't beautiful. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but with the pain lies power, the knowledge that you're moving forward. Survivors should not be ashamed. They're still here, surviving, making them absolute badasses. I have 5 sons now. They're young, but already asking questions. I wrestle with what to share, knowing that one day they might read news accounts or Out of the Woods. But I won't lie to them. I want them to know their mother's story, to understand why I am the way I am, my parenting style, my strictness, why they couldn't walk to the park alone, why I love them so fiercely. I hope they find strength in my journey. Like all trauma survivors, I am more than what happened to me. 20 years later, I'm strong, resilient, and I feel I can survive anything. I envision myself on a battlefield wearing my trauma as armor. I stared death in the face. Nothing can break me now. If you are out there and you are suffering in silence, don't hold it inside. Let it out. Make those closest to you listen, even when they say they can't take it. We can't stop the pain without ending the silence.